Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Story, where we discuss what Canada is, what Canada could be, and what Canada should be. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Canadian Story. We're joined by Chelsae Petrovic. Chelsae, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys.
It's great to have you. I met you last year, I believe, in Claire's home. We were just sitting down talking about the issues that we were facing. But for those who don't know who you are, can you share a little bit of your story and what makes you you?
Well, yeah, thanks. So I don't know where to start about what makes me me, but I am a mother of two, so married mother of two. I have been a nurse for the past, I think, 12 or 13 years now. I don't like to specify when. It feels like a lot longer, and especially now with what's going on in healthcare. I run a not-for-profit here in Chelsae called My City Care that helps low socioeconomic youth, and I am Chelsae's current mayor. So that's just a little bit about me, and I guess I've put my name forward in the UCP nomination race. So that's me in a little nutshell.
For Livingstone-Macleod, right? For the riding. And we had another person on that is running against you in that nomination. And we have 7 people, I believe, running in that nomination, or?
I heard there was as many as 8, but I've heard a few have dropped out. But I haven't had any final number of how many people are running. And yeah, I guess I want to say the more the merrier, so we can actually have a good democratic process through it all.
Yeah, I actually always get excited when a lot of people are running for a position because it means A, that somebody wants it, but B, that we're actually seeing a very vibrant democracy. So what was it that kind of stirred you to A, run for mayor, because I love that story, and then B, now you're like, oh, well, I'm going to go for the MLA spot. And I know that the current MLA there decided not to run again, which is another reason I believe that so many people are running. But I'd love to hear your story politically. Like, what got you engaged in politics?
I was ticked off, actually, is really what it came down to. I've never been in politics prior to becoming mayor. So that was a big jump. But essentially what happened was I felt there was a bit of a divide between the community of Chelsae and town council. And I thought, well, gosh, like I'm pretty good at advocating for people and listening and making some positive change. So why not put my name forward? So I actually was going to put my name forward just as a council member. My husband said, like, don't do the town a disservice. Just go for mayor and see what happens. The worst that can happen is you lose and we go about life as normal. And I put my name in as mayor, and that was the first time I've ever campaigned. And I have to say that is a much different level than campaigning for an MLA position for Livingstone-Macleod. But the community was gracious enough to vote me in. So I won over the incumbent mayor. I'm Chelsae's first female mayor, Chelsae's youngest, I think. I don't know. There's a couple of things in there. So it's actually a pretty cool experience to break a little bit of that stigma in and around the old boys club. And it has been a wild ride for the last year and a half. Once I seen what was happening in provincial politics, though, once again, I sort of became a little bit discouraged. And I think I was maybe even one of the last people to put my name forward running for this MLA position. I did it, and not because I think a lot of people maybe, there's no one else running, I'll put my name forward. And I think I was one of those where I was like, well, there's 5 or 6 or 7 other, I don't remember how many there was at the time. And I thought, I'm pretty good at advocating for individuals. I'm pretty good at, I've done a pretty good job here in Chelsae, and why not take that to the next level to Edmonton and advocate for Livingstone-Macleod that way. So that's kind of how it could be.
What was it that upset you? I agree, this division that we're seeing across our society is completely wrong. But what was it that was causing this division, and how did you bring the people of Claire's home together to say, no, we want you to bring us back together? Because that was kind of your goal, right?
Yeah, I think it's the fact that I'm a normal individual. There's nothing really, like, when I say there's nothing special about me, I realize that I am just a human being, just like everybody else is. You can come up to me and have coffee with me, talk to me on the street, and relatable. I have young children, some older children. Even running with this not-for-profit, I realized that people, it doesn't matter how insignificant their issue may be, it's a big issue for them at the time. And so let's sit down and actually have these conversations. Let's talk about real things and be real people. And I think that was something that was missing a little bit. And I think it's something that still continues to be missed, is that we have politicians, and I hate to say it because now I am one. But we have politicians that they're on a pedestal, and they are, they have the people working for them, and it's not the other way around. As politicians, we need to realize that we work for the people. And so to be with the people, to understand them, is kind of the only way to go about it. Let's flip it to the right way. So I think that's sort of what gave me a little bit of an edge going into, I guess, municipal politics, is just normal. One of 7 billion people in the world.
I love that you're saying that we need to focus on the people that we're in charge of, as opposed to being the politicians. Because I think what we've seen a lot of in Alberta's recent history is politicians more telling the people what they are going to do, as opposed to listening to them in a big way. So what have you found now that you are a politician, like you said? What is the weirdest thing about making sure that you're listening to the people and communicating what needs to be done from a governance standpoint?
Oh God, red tape. That's the weirdest thing, is that sometimes it shouldn't be as difficult as it is. It really shouldn't be that difficult. But there's a ton of red tape involved. So in order to get what the people want, and to truly represent the people, there's a bit of navigating through that political field, I guess you could say, through bylaws and policies and this, and how do you truly represent? Because it's, even in the town of Chelsae, and it's going to happen in Livingstone-Macleod and across Alberta, and we can see it across Canada. You're not going to make everyone happy, but how do you go about doing the best thing for the most amount of people while hearing their concerns without telling them you wouldn't understand? It's politics. So it's a little bit of that balancing act of really communicating to the people of, this is what I've heard while being out in the community, through the red tape that you have to go through, the hoops and all the jumps you need to make. This is sort of what we're able to do. And as that whole, here's what we were able to accomplish. And not everyone's going to be happy, but it's sort of the best that you can possibly do. And you do it for, not for the 7 people sitting around a boardroom table, you're doing it for the majority of the population. And it's just a really interesting balancing act of navigating, listening, understanding. It's
hard to describe, right? Because what you're dealing with is, like you said, so many diverse interests, right? You're being talked at from multiple different angles. Why don't you describe that experience to people so they kind of understand? Because I think a lot of people who have become interested in politics are still not practicing politics. So getting your perspective as someone who's entered into it, what is it like to balance the interests of others? And how do you make that decision, like you said, for the best decision for the most amount of people?
It doesn't come easy. Well, and obviously, I don't think anything in politics is easy, but to sit in there and to balance that it's difficult. And I think it's getting people to understand of why you made that decision. So how do you balance it? You're out in the community, you're listening to what they have to say, you're listening to their wants, their concerns. Some of the biggest concerns are the cost of living, the cost of groceries. Like it's absolutely, what's happening right now is insane. And so you're hearing all of this, and then all of a sudden the budget gets put in front of you that says, well, and the cost of living has gone up, so your employees also need a raise. And you're like, well, then do we tax more? Do we not tax more? How do you balance it all? And how do you essentially try to make everyone happy? But how do you do it in a way that's positive? And I think that's where that communication comes back of, we understand that this has happened, but in order for our community to not flood again, we have to do this. And we understand that with inflation, the price has gone up, which means that we have to balance and do budgets and have unique thoughts about how we go about it, and then really communicate that back to the public. So how do you go about it the right way? I don't know. It's just that increased in communication of, I made this decision. Here's why I made the decision, and lay it all out on the table. And I think that's that's all you can do, really. So it's a very unique balancing act that is it's a balancing act I've never experienced before, obviously never being in politics. But it's very unique.
So we have a lot of nurses that listen to us, some doctors.
Yeah.
You're a nurse. So how would you compare let's call it the medical system to the political system? Because I think this is something that a lot of people don't understand, right? Is that the political system is different. And one of the things that I often say to people is, I drive a truck. I spend a lot of time driving around in that truck, many, many, many hours. But if that truck broke down, I would not know how to fix it, right? And a lot of people, they spend a lot of time reading about politics. They spend a lot of time talking about politics, but they don't actually understand kind of the inner workings of it. But many people do understand the inner workings of the medical system because they've either been engaged with it or they've worked in it. So what would you say is, like, maybe make an analogy between the differences so people can kind of understand, a compare and contrast, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, so that's kind of funny because I see a little bit of similarities because I work in the emergency department. So it's everyone comes in with their problems, and how do you fix it? How do you go about fixing, how do you go about being polite to them while you're trying to save their life? And it's a high stress environment. You're no please or thank yous. But so it's a little bit kind of, as for my role, it looks a little bit the same, of just continuing to advocate and balancing saving their life and, doing it with a smile on your face as they're bleeding out, I guess you could say. But
right. Yeah,
so
that's a good point. That's a really good point. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Sorry. I was like, well, it's a little bit similar just from a bedside nursing perspective. I'm like, it kind of feels a little bit the same in a weird way. But with nursing and politics, it's hard, I guess, to say, because, nurses and with Alberta Health Services, we don't necessarily have appointed individuals. We have bureaucrats that are sitting in there. And once again, it's sort of similar to politics. I'm sorry, I might disagree with you.
No, good. I like that. That's good.
It might be a little bit similar to politics, because once again, we have people sitting in the high up office, and they're going to tell you, they haven't stepped foot onto the floor in 20 years, and they're going to tell you how you're going to go about your nursing practice with little to no input of how to do it. So frontline nursing and politics is a little bit similar in that aspect. We as nurses were told what to do, how to do it. We have the unions that butt in, who, let's be honest, the unions only have the union's best interest at heart and how they make money. We can see that with how they sort of pay into those third-party advertisements, get right into it and just come out and say it. All the nurses are going to hate me for that, and my union reps are going to come after me for that one. But once again, it's individuals. We have, we have our frontline nurses who are doing the best they can to advocate for their patients. And then we have bureaucrats at the top who are just sort of telling us how it's going to be and what you're going to do about it, and say you wouldn't understand because you're not in management. So it's the same thing as politics. We need to start, listening to those frontline nurses, telling them what we need, how we need it, and moving forward that way. And that's the same with politics, is let us tell you what we need, and then let's navigate around that instead of telling the people of what to do. So sorry. I
like that. I like that. See, that's a great way of looking at it.
I've got a question in there, and this is something that I've thought about a lot. So as mayor, obviously you're trying to do the best for the people that you represent, right? Yeah. But you have a set of rules that you have to follow too. You have some of those bureaucrats sitting in those high up offices that you have to I guess, involve in the conversation. You have red tape. You have a whole bunch of stuff in your way. You can't, it's not like you can just, you talked about the cost of living in groceries. You can't be elected as mayor and then walk into the local grocery store and say, cut 30% off all the prices. Let's go. We're gonna make, groceries less expensive for people. So can you explain to us how you would go about trying to tackle a problem within the community, and what power you do hold and can affect on the situation to help people? Because I don't really understand, like, it's great, you're sitting there as mayor, but what can you actually do, and what is the process for solving something within your community?
If I can be blunt and honest, as mayor, solely by myself, there's not a heck of a lot that I can do. I am one of 7 votes that sits around a boardroom table. And I, unfortunately, I don't get to make I'm not one sole decision maker. So as mayor, if anyone tells you that they they get to make all these decisions. Well, they're lying to you. It's a group of 7 people that vote on decisions. But what I do is we have it's called a CAO, Chief Administrative Officer. And so he, along with the administration, they put together different policies and booklets and budgets, and it's our job to review them and to vote on them and to vote on them in the best interest. And sometimes that's incomplete information. And I'm not saying it happens in Chelsae where it's biased information, but the CAO, if he wanted something, he could essentially have that literature swing one way or another of whatever he thought was best. And it's our job as elected officials to be able to navigate through that paperwork, through that budget, and ask those questions, ask the hard questions. Why is this incomplete? This seems like half information. What do we do? And it's having these conversations with the other 7 members that sit on council to make the best decisions. And sometimes when you have that vote, I may vote something down because I don't feel it's in the best interest of the community, and 6 others may think it is in the best interest of the community. And at that moment, I'm defeated. That bylaw, policy, whatever it is going to go through. And I just have to know at the end of the day that I've done everything I can. I listened to the people. I voted in what I thought was best for the people. And try to read through all of those policies, red tape, all of those, to ensure that I'm having a full story of what's happening. Because far too often you can have staff. Doesn't matter what kind of staff they are, where they are politically, if they want something, you can write a report. That's where we get that bias information coming in to how to sway somebody. And I guess as an elected official, it's our job is to navigate through it. So as the mayor, solely as the mayor, I there's nothing I can do all by myself other than to be with the people, hear what they have to say, and then advocate and try my best to bring that concern forward. So it sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Like, oh, I'm the mayor. But what people realize is that doesn't really mean a whole heck of a lot. I'm the poster of the town. Like I, show up for photo ops and listen and learn and try to do my best. So it's not as glorified as people may think it is.
I think this is a really good point, and I want to dig into it further because I think you've hit an important nail on the head, which is politics is compromise, and a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people say, "Well, I don't want to compromise. I just want politics to do whatever I want." But to actually work in politics, to succeed in politics, you have to be a good team player. Right. And so as the mayor, really what you are is a team captain for kind of like a hockey team or something like that, right? Where you're leading the team. And like you said, you're the representative of the team and you're showing up and you're the face of the team in a lot of ways, but you're still on a team. So do you want to talk a little bit about what that's like? Because I think that's something that people don't understand. They think of it like a corporation in some ways, even though corporations are the same, they're teams. But like they think, oh, there's the boss. And the boss tells people what to do. That is a mindset, but it doesn't work in politics, really.
No, there is no, we joke I sometimes get called the boss lady, and it's laughable because, like you said, I'm not the boss. I'm the team captain, and it's leading and encouraging the best from each one of our council, and then in turn, inspiring our CAO to do the best he can for the people. So working as a team, well, that's fun. And it's fun when you have, you're myself, and then I have 6 others that I get to work with, and we all have diverse backgrounds. And when I say diverse, I mean that we don't all think the same politically. We all want the best for our community, but how we get from, point A to point B is all different. So you really have to, like you said, you have to be able to, that's where that's having that full information and that full understanding of what's best for the community. Because then as a group, when we have such diverse backgrounds, such diverse, diverse educations, we have a nurse, we have a stay-at-home mom, we have a chef, a car salesman. There's so many of us, and we all have all these different backgrounds. And then you kind of have to come together, and I want to say you have to fight it out sometimes of how do you do it and to see other people's perspectives. So it's very much a team effort, and you have to have the ability to have your mind be changed. You have to have the ability to not be so tunnel visioned, and to see other people's points of view. And then as the leader, to be able to kind of hear all those points of view, bring them together, bring everyone back on track, and then be able to have a full understanding of the issue at hand and to be able to vote on it and still be able to vote on it with the community's best interest at heart. So it's behind closed doors. It's fun, I guess.
Yeah,
but the word I would use, fun.
Isn't that beautiful though? Because that is democracy, and it's good that it's not all one opinion sitting around that table, and it's good that it's a diverse background and set of ideas, and it's good that you're going into that with the understanding that, hey, I should be open to having my mind changed because maybe someone else sees it differently than I do, and maybe they're right, or they have a point that I didn't see, or whatever it happens to be. That is how democracy is meant to function. And it's kind of exciting to hear that play out in your scenario. I think that's great. Here's another question though: is that a full-time position for you, or are you also nursing?
I am. Well, prior to starting to campaign for this, the nomination, I worked over full-time as a nurse. So I worked at 3 different locations over full-time, and on top of that, still did the mayor gig, and then I volunteer my time for the not-for-profit. So I guess the motto is, if you need something done, you ask a busy person. So, so yeah, I still, right now I've taken a little bit. I'm still currently the mayor. I've still really want to advocate for Chelsae. That's my biggest thing, is to continue to advocate for us in these, it's uncertain times right now in this political world. We don't know what's happening. There's a provincial election coming up. We don't know who our UCP representative is going to be. So I still, as long as I can possibly go where it's not a conflict of interest, I want to stay on as mayor and to advocate as much for the town. So I've taken a little bit of a step back from nursing in order to be able to handle full-time campaigning, and then, the part-time mayor gig, and be able to balance those a little bit. And then obviously, if I hopefully win the nomination, and going into the provincial election, I would take a leave of absence from being the mayor, just to ensure that no lines are crossed. There's not any sort of conflict of interest whatsoever. Because I think at that point, it would be a little bit more, it'd be difficult to remain nonpartisan in a provincial election sitting in the mayor's chair. That's one of the biggest things as town council, is to remain nonpartisan when you're sitting at that table. And I think that would become a little bit difficult, coming into a provincial election. And then when we kick out the NDP, I would step down as being mayor. You're not able to hold the MLA position and the mayor position. So there is, it's a day by day, how does our future look? So it's, a little bit of uncertainty of what our future looks like over the next 6 months in our household. But it was a community decision, and community decision meaning my entire family, including our pastor, got in on this decision to see, what does this uncertainty look like for us? And we've made the decisions based on that.
So how do you view the political situation, both in your province and in our country? We talk about politics all the time on the podcast, and I'm some talking head. I'm just a dude with a podcast who likes to talk about politics, but you are boots on the ground in the middle of it every day, thinking about the future of your country politically, thinking about the future of your province politically, thinking about what you can do to make that future a good one. How do you see the political landscape as it stands right now?
Volatile. It's uncertain. It's scary. It is divided. It's looking at all of it. When we look at what's happening with the federal government's overreach into Alberta, even in Alberta, it feels like there's, uncertain times. So, for the past couple of years, we haven't had any voices at the table, and we've had decisions that are made for us that aren't necessarily in our best interest. So when I look at it and boots on the ground, talking to everyone, people are done with politics. They have no trust in politics. Why should I listen? Why should I trust you? That's one of the biggest questions that I get. Why should I trust you? And I'm like, you shouldn't. Please don't trust me. Trust is earned. You and I do not have a conversation for 10 minutes and you put your trust into me. You can put hope into me. But time and time again, politicians have broken our trust, and they haven't listened. They haven't done necessarily what's best for us. So to have hope in me is different than trusting. So they don't know what's to come. They don't know what to do. They're confused of, who do I vote for? Why do I vote for them? Why bother showing up when my voices haven't been heard? So when I say volatile, I mean that comes across all aspects, even down to, I voted in a Conservative government, But yet we have a Liberal government that's continuously overreaching into our province. So what's the point of having a Conservative government when the Liberal government, or when the federal Liberal government, is just walking in and sort of doing whatever they want, and slapping environment on top of it so they can get their fingers in the door. So I think people are just feeling a little bit hopeless, and I'm starting to see a little bit of a change. We're starting to see some hope for the future. We're starting to see good people step up to the plate to put their name forward into municipal politics, provincial politics, and hopefully into some federal politics as well. And hopefully we can start to change. It's going to take time to be able to change people's mind, to understand that now we're starting to have politics back to people politicians versus party politician or bureaucrat politicians. So we're starting to slowly see that transition, but it's going to take time. But there's a little bit of hope, some light at the end of the tunnel.
I think that's really great advice. I don't think that you should, and I don't mean this in a malicious way, but I don't think that you should trust politicians. And the example I'll give of that, obviously, we all know my opinion of Mr. Trudeau. We don't need to go there. But I actually kind of look, because I only really got politically activated over the past few years, right? Prior to the pandemic, politicians didn't really get in my way of living my life. So it wasn't something that I thought about at all. And then, so I entered this political arena when, people started getting locked out of restaurants because they didn't want to take a medicine. Like that was just crazy to me. And so I started thinking about all of this stuff, but we have a Liberal government right now, at least federally, right? I look forward to hopefully one day seeing a Conservative government at the federal level. But I want to, in terms of trusting politicians, I think Mr. Poilievre is great. I think he's a really good example of what leadership in this country could look like, and I look forward to hopefully seeing him sit in that office. But I don't think we should trust him. And what I mean by that is, as soon as he sits down in that office, I think it is our responsibility as the people who vote him in to ensure that he stays accountable. Because so often politicians can really kind of, say the right things and get people going and get people excited and get people happy. And then they sit in the office and all of the people go, oh, good, we got him there. We're all good now. I don't think that's how that works anymore. I look forward to seeing a Conservative government sitting in power that we can also hold accountable, not just holding accountable as opposition, the Liberal government. I'm looking forward to seeing our guy in the office and saying, hey, let's deliver on this stuff, and staying with it, because you shouldn't trust them. You can put hope in them, but you shouldn't trust them. You should demand the result that they promise.
Yes. Thank you. I agree with you. I love the idea of being fired. I know it's a great, actually, I know. Well, don't take that the wrong way, but I believe that if you have the ability to fire your politicians, you are going to have politicians that are going to follow through on their word. And we look at, Kenny, what was it? He dropped it from, you could get rid of a politician. It used to be 66% of the voting. Sorry, I don't have I don't have the legislation in front of me, but it was 66% of the voters had to sign this petition in order to get it. And Kenny dropped it down to 40%, and he was seen as this hero. Oh, look at, we got, 40% can get rid of you. But we need to even look at that further, because 40% in Livingstone-Macleod, something like 16 or 17,000 people you'd have to get signatures to over a process of 60 days. That's a huge amount of signatures. You have to have, that's a big team to get rid of someone, and it makes it almost nearly impossible. But you have to be careful, because you don't want the opposition to, come in kicking and screaming when they don't like that their person didn't get in. If you have a Conservative government getting in and the NDP just, are ticked off and they go and get that 40%. But we need to start looking at, how do we tweak it to keep our politicians accountable? If they're not fulfilling their roles, they're part-time politicians, they're sheep in wolves' clothing, or however you want to look at it. They're not who they say you are. How do we look at being able to fire them? How do we keep them accountable? Even when we look at what's happening with the local constituency association boards, how is it that we can have family members sitting on boards? I don't understand how this is a possibility. When we look at our constituency association board here in Livingstone-Macleod, I was like, to my husband, I was like, gosh, you would be really good at that. And he's like, yeah, maybe I would. And I said, but I'm running, so you can't sit on the board, because that's not good. Even though he would be a great person to sit on the board and he would be all of those things, to me, I'm like, if I won this nomination, I think it is such a conflict to have a family member sitting on there. So, let's have boards that are going to hold our MLAs accountable, and let's have legislation in place where we can fire our MLAs if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. If they're not representing you, why are they there? Just to collect a paycheck? No, thank you. So I like the idea of being able to be fired, because it keeps MLAs, it keeps politicians accountable, and it keeps them on the right track to moving forward. So I don't know if you'll hear anyone else say that.
I could not agree more. I think the ability to fire politicians is what will keep them accountable, right? If they can't lose their jobs, and I think we're seeing this all over the country, right? A lot of politicians have not been able to be fired because there's no mechanism. For example, in Ontario, there was a lot of people who were very upset with Doug Ford, but there was no mechanism to get rid of him within the constitution of the PC Party of Ontario. However, in Alberta, there were a lot of people that were upset with Jason Kenney, and some people don't agree with that. Some people do, but they were given the opportunity to ask for him to no longer run, and they asked him not to. 51.5%, I guess, said yes. But I mean, that's the lowest I've ever heard of anyone getting in a leadership review. And he decided to resign over that, because he realized that if only half of his own party supports him, then he probably shouldn't continue on. I think you're totally right. And I think, so just to clarify, you love the accountability of the members. You want to be held accountable by the members.
Absolutely. I don't think there's any other way to go about it. This is how we're going to get politicians in place that are going to serve their people. This is how we're going to get rid of party politicians. This is how we're going to get rid of bureaucrat politicians. And this is how we're going to get politicians that are in there solely to serve the people. Far too often, through this campaigning, I hear, oh, you'll get such, what a good paycheck. Well, honestly, I can think of a lot of easier things to do to make that kind of money. I'm doing it now. Like, nursing is a lot easier than it would be. Working in it as a emergency nurse is going to be a lot easier to make that kind of money. And so to me, I'm like, it's not about the money, it's about the people. And oh yeah, just serve your 8 years and get your pension. Well, I already have a pension. I'm not doing this for a pension. I'm doing this for the people. And in order to prove that I'm doing this for the people, I want the people to have the ability to fire me if I'm not serving them in an appropriate manner. Not for the opposition to be able to come in and fire me because there's the NDP and they're upset that a Conservative government got in there. That's not what this is for. This is, are you serving the people? And if you're not, well, it's time for me to go. It's time for someone else to get in there who's going to do a better job than I am. And that's, so yeah, I really love the idea of being held accountable.
Let's just, brainstorm or spitball here for a moment. When we're dealing with politicians who don't want to be held accountable by the people, right? The people that would like to avoid that accountability and keep that job. What do you think it is that's motivating them? Is it power? What do you think's going on? Because I believe, and I think when I was growing up, and it feels like it's changed radically, but when I was growing up, politicians had to at least pretend that they were there for the people, right? That it was the reason that they were there, and they were public servants. It was literally called a public service. In fact, they still call it that, although I'm not really sure if that's true anymore in some cases. But what do you think it is that makes people want to avoid accountability?
I think we're in a society now that we're in a cancel culture society of, if I don't like what you have to say, I'm just going to cancel you and ignore you. And I think we're just in that place in society where people don't have to be held accountable anymore. You just say, this is mine. This is my right to do it. And I'm just going to do it my way. I feel like there's a little bit of I think it's a little bit of society is part of the problem, is that we have no accountability in society anymore. We all go about our daily lives, with no recourse. We don't care about our neighbors anymore. We don't care about our friends. We're so tunnel visioned on just ourselves. We have become a very selfish society. And I think when we look at politicians, sometimes it's oh, I'm a politician now and there's fame and people want to talk to you. And how do you let that go? How do you go from being on top and go all the way to the bottom? I think that's hard for people to let go. Once you get put on a pedestal, how do you jump off of that pedestal and no one cares about you anymore? Like, I think we're in a society where it's about Facebook likes. It's how many people like me, how many people this, all of that stuff's a really big issue now. And how do we get back to kind of the basics of politicians are here to serve us? It's, they're not famous by no means. They're supposed to just be people that represent you. So let's get back to just having normal people, like, as normal as you can possibly find for someone who, wants to jump into politics, because you have to have a little bit.
Yeah.
There's got to be something a little but you have to have people that are, that don't want to be put on a pedestal, that aren't doing it for the fame, that aren't doing it for the fortune, I guess you could say, depending on how you look at the bureaucrats filling your pockets, but get people in there that are going to do it. And I think we've drifted. We're in a society that just loves likes and loves to be wanted and center of attention. And I think sometimes people don't know how to let that go. They don't know how to walk away from it, and they're doing it for all of the wrong reasons.
Okay, I want to go into
that.
It's interesting you said we live in a society with no accountability or responsibility. We just published our episode with Theo Fleury on yesterday, Tuesday. And he said the exact same thing. So that's twice we've heard this now in a very short amount of time. Can you flesh out that idea a little bit more? How is a lack of accountability manifesting itself in our society right now?
Oh,
I know that's a tough nail to hit on the head. It's because I'm thinking about it too, and I agree with you, but it would be tough to cough up like a finite example. But let's try here. Where do you see a lack of accountability and responsibility playing out in our Canadian society right now? Because there's society and politics, and they interplay with each other. And I'm not a politician, so I'm very interested in how we can affect this society. So let's talk about that for a second.
So, this might be political suicide here, what I'm about to say. So, which is fine with me, but it needs to be said. I think we've gone into a society that we have become so dependent on being saved and so dependent on the amount of Facebook likes that we have that we honestly don't know how to do anything else. We can see this time and time again of, don't worry, the government's going to come and save us. Don't worry, the government's going to come and save us. Don't worry, the government's going to come and save us. And we've become sort of dependent. We've become tunnel visioned on our own life and thinking that someone's going to come and save us. There's always going to be a Superman around the corner to save us. And so we actually haven't had any accountability. We can look at this, and I see it in healthcare. Maybe, I'm going to say it. Maybe the reason why you had a heart attack was because you haven't taken care of yourself. You're extremely overweight. You haven't, you haven't managed your congestive heart failure. You haven't managed your diabetes. And there's no personal accountability, but they come into the hospital and it's all of a sudden, it's everyone else's problem but their own. And let's start looking at what can we do as a society to prevent things? So when we look at Thornhill, that could have been, I'm not sure if you guys are aware what happened with Thornhill. They had that land use bylaw that came through, and it had nothing to do. It was so against a rural way of living. And instead of just letting it pass and then being like, oh no, what do we do? The people showed up. The people showed up and said, no, thank you. We don't want this. And if we start showing up to our own lives, and I say that in our own way, if I start showing up to my own life, and being accountable with my health, with my finances, with this, not overspending. When I show up to my own life and have my own accountability, the government doesn't need to come in and save us. When we have all of this, and I think that's part of it, is we've kind of just become this. I don't know if this is even hitting the nail on the head. I don't know what it is, but it's just kind of.
No, I think this is an important. I think this is an important conversation. I think we should be talking about, and this is something that we've tried to echo on the podcast time and time again, and something that I know is important to me and important to David, and a journey that we are all going through. We're not sitting here from a pedestal saying, anyone is speaking from a place of expertise on this, but we should be taking more responsibility for our own outcomes. So what does that look like to you? Maybe just speak personally.
Well, it's everything. It's I think it's even starting to just take responsibility of myself, and then look at those around me and how can you help? And it's a weird thing because I think once you have one person doing it, everyone else starts to do it. So, for example, our neighbor, one of our neighbors ended up having a heart attack. It is now, I believe as a neighborhood, we have to start getting out of our little tunnel vision of me, 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 but without truly focusing about me, 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 and look at other people. Well, let's start shoveling his driveway, right? We had neighbors, they knew I was extremely busy. My husband decided he was going to go keto for a month. I'm not sure it was a thing. And our other neighbors who have chickens, they were bringing us fresh eggs every single day just to help him get through his process. And it was that little bit of caring of we're not so tunnel visioned on ourselves without truly caring about ourselves and taking responsibility for ourselves. Let's start looking at, I had children to raise my own children. Let's eat our fruits and vegetables and fiber so we don't have emergency room visits. And then look at those around us as well. And how do we start to become really good neighbors and less dependent on everyone coming to save us and just more having this, like how it's supposed to be, like loving thy neighbor and helping them and getting out of just our everyday nonsense life of work, eat, sleep, no accountability, no this, no that. Like, let's just get back to what it's supposed to be, I think. And that's taking care of
kind
ourselves.
Of community. And you obviously are someone who really cares about community because you're not for profit, you're in emergency, which, even though you said it would be easier to do emergency care than politics, I mean, a lot of people wouldn't agree with you, I think, because there's a very high stress environment in emergency nursing. I can only imagine. I mean, I have a hard enough time with some of the stress in my own life, but I can't imagine if it's life and death right in front of me every day. So I actually think that will prepare you well for politics on the provincial level. But going back to this personal responsibility piece, let's talk about like accountability. Do you think it's because people don't want to look inside and say, oh, maybe I'm not doing the things that I need to do, A, for myself, like you talked about, like preventative health and all that kind of stuff, but B, I'm not taking care of the people around me, and that's why I'm not being taken care of. Because I'm a big believer that if you're out there trying to help others are going to help you.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where it's hard to explain it, right? Of just it's one of those, you reap what you sow. So if you're a good, loving, caring individual and you care for yourself and you care for your family and you care for those around you, people can't. It's pretty hard to it's pretty hard for a neighbor to drop off fresh farm eggs to me, and then for me to drive by and give them the middle finger. You can't, I don't know another way to see it. Sorry, I I'm not perfect, but that's what it is. And I think once you start taking care of yourself and, going about it that way, it's contagious. You can't help it. And it just keeps building and building and building. And I think that's where we're currently in an unhealthy society. And we really need to start working towards, personal responsibility, taking care of what's in here. And then that's going to spread to those around you. So that's let's all sit around in a circle and sing Kumbaya. But I think that's something that we're really missing here in this day and age.
Yeah. So what do you think is standing? Because what you're talking about is a very community-oriented message. It's being present in the world around you. It's seeing the people around you. Do you have any comments as to what might be currently getting in the way of that? I have my own thoughts, but I want to reserve them until I hear what you have to say. What is standing in the way of us engaging in our community?
Us. Me. If that's it. I don't know any other answer. If it's a choice. So if you're not engaging in the community, that's because you're not engaging in the community. And if the community is not engaging in you, is it because you're not engaging in the community? So I think that we're the problem.
Well, yeah, that would be an example of personal responsibility, which we like here. I have a theory. I think, and it's obviously a very big and complex question, and there is no one factor that plays directly into it or represents the whole problem. But I think we have mistaken online community for real community, and it's not, right? You talked earlier about, going after the Facebook likes or whatever that is. That is not community, but we mistake it as community because it masquerades as community. But, I just moved into a new townhouse here in Woodstock. Going on Instagram and liking my new neighbor's photo is an entirely different behavior and an entirely different experience than when we got like a foot of snow dumped on us and I was out there. I was out there 6 a.m. because my wife needed to get out of the driveway to go to work, and he was coming home from the night shift, and we share a driveway and we were shoveling each other's driveways. That is an entirely different experience. And so what I think is that it would be good for us to re-engage with people who are standing in the same room and to not mistake community as going online and liking what your local politician is doing,
You are so right, I think. I can't disagree with that at all. You're right.
And so we have about 15 minutes left here. So I want to get into some of the meat of what makes you tick. I like that you mentioned talking to your pastor and the accountability stuff it's perfect. That's my heart, is that our politicians must be held accountable. So I love that. But what are your principles, right? Because it also comes down to compromise is important. Making sure we find the best decision for the most number of people. But there's going to always come moments in your political career. There's going to come moments where choices have to be made, and that you're being elected to based on some of those things. Like, what is it that you believe are non-negotiables? And accountability seems to be one that's perfect. But what else? What are your lines in the sand that you will not cross?
Well, I think it comes back to that the accountability. That is one thing that's non-negotiable for me. And I tell everyone, you're voting in a UCP representative, and I promise I will never cross the floor, but I can't promise that I will always be a UCP representative. And why I say that is because if there is a vote, and we've seen this in the past with previous elected officials, that if there is a vote and you do not vote in favor of it, you are no longer part of that caucus. They remove you, they fire you from that caucus. And if that means that I have to vote down something that is, if someone says you must vote this way, otherwise you're kicked out, and it's not in Livingstone-Macleod's best interest, well, I guess I'm no longer a UCP representative, because I'm not going to be voting for something that is not in our riding's best interest. There's that compromise of, what's happening in Fish Creek and what happens in all other parts of Alberta that, may need to be passed, and it doesn't affect Livingstone-Macleod whatsoever, or how we look at it. It's, there's going to be those, but if it directly impacts Livingstone-Macleod and not in Livingstone-Macleod's best interest, I'm voting it down. It doesn't matter what that looks like to me. And I think that goes across the board for all of the topics. So that's my line in the sand. There's no other line in the sand. I'm still willing to learn, still willing to hear what people have to say. So as far as other lines in the sand, first and foremost, it's what's best for Livingstone-Macleod. And that's the biggest, that's it. I'll dig a trench in the sand if I need to ensure that does not ever get crossed. And that's my sole focus, is one, accountability and being that voice for Livingstone-Macleod. That's my biggest thing. And sometimes I may have to put my own personal thought, or my own personal belief on what I think is best. If Livingstone-Macleod truly believes that this is best for them, and I'm gonna learn that through forums, through town halls, through continual increased communication with the board and through the constituents. Sometimes I might have to reevaluate my way of thinking a little bit, and we're gonna have to vote just in the best interest of Livingstone-Macleod at each and every vote that happens. So it's not a line in the sand. It's more of a trench in the sand that cannot ever be crossed. And yeah, the rest is, I guess you'll see it. It's, I don't know any other way to go about it.
I like that. Yeah, so you're a very grassroots focused politician. You believe that you need to be hearing from the people and taking their voice to Edmonton as opposed to taking Edmonton's voice to the people. Would
Yes.
that be a good way of summarizing it?
That's it. I am first and foremost for the people of Livingstone-Macleod. I am their elected representative. I am their voice in Edmonton, and that's it. That's the bottom line. If we don't get an elected official in as our MLA that truly has the voice of Livingstone-Macleod in, we're just going to have a repeat of what happened in the last 4 or 8 years, and we deserve better. We absolutely deserve better than that here in Livingstone-Macleod.
So you're out there campaigning every day, selling memberships, building up your support. You already have a base of support because you obviously became mayor. So there must be some people that really appreciate you. What are you hearing? What are the concerns of Livingstone-Macleod?
Oh, well, first, they haven't been heard. They feel their voices haven't been heard. They haven't been represented properly. And there's been lack of communication. And I think that's what everyone's biggest concern is so far, and that's straight across the board, all the way High River, Claresholm, Nowton, Fort Macleod, Crowsnest, Pass, Pincher, everywhere I've been so far. That is their biggest thing, is that their voices have been lost and they haven't been heard in so long. And they're done with it. And then after that, then we get into, we look into what's best for us in Alberta, and it comes straight back to what's best for Livingstone-Macleod, and we're worried about the overreach of the federal government. People are really, really concerned about what that is, because once again, it's people in Ottawa dictating to us of what they feel is best without us having any, community consultation in that. Our voices, once again, are lost about what that looks like. And then we get into kind of that nitty gritty of healthcare, the cost of living, all of those things. It's straight across the board. I believe in all of, across Alberta's. We're looking at our resources as well, when we're having our farmers be attacked, our ranchers be attacked. Our energy sector is being completely attacked. Our healthcare is being attacked. Personal autonomy, everything else comes along with it. But the first and foremost thing that everyone wants to know is, are you truly going to represent us? Because we haven't had a representative in a really long time. And once we have that, the rest will follow. We will figure out healthcare, because we will figure out healthcare of what's in Livingstone-Macleod's best interest. We'll figure out the education system, because we're going to figure it out in Livingstone-Macleod's best interest. Our resources, our farmers, we need to start putting some stuff in place to ensure our farmers and ranchers are protected, not just cover up this, beautiful farmland with solar panels for the company to go and sell it to a numbered company, go bankrupt, and leave farmer to do it. 60% of farmers don't have a succession plan. So let's ensure that we have proper things in place that way when they pass their farm onto, their farmland onto their children or grandchildren, that it's not just strewn about with solar panels across it. Let's look at how, right? I don't know. That's just what's happening. We can see it happening in Germany right now. So how do we, first and foremost, let's listen to the people, and then let's figure out all of these problems along the way and start putting legislation in place to protect us, start giving the people a voice back. And I think that's the biggest concern straight across the riding.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's really the concern across Canada in a lot of ways is, why are our politicians not answering our calls? Why are they not answering our emails? Why don't we hear from them? And I understand. I want to be clear that it's hard to have a lot of people yelling at you. It's hard to have a lot of people saying, no, this is not good, and not know what to do. But that's kind of the job, right? And I think actually in your case, one of the big advantages you would have in this race is you're used to high stress environments. You're not someone who's going to fold under pressure, because pressure is kind of where you go. You chose a career that's high pressure, and now you're going into another one that's probably high pressure. But what do you think? Why do you think that the riding hasn't had representation? And I don't want to slander any individuals, but what do you think it is about the political system that needs to change so that we actually have representation?
It feels like we're just spinning. It goes back to the accountability. It's the same topics over and over, and I think these are because they're the most important topics. Is if there's no way to hold our MLAs accountable, no way to hold our elected officials accountable, why do you get voted in and that's it? See you later. See you in 3.5 years. Hope you did your job. Like that's kind of how our political system works. You vote someone in, and 3.5 years later, we decide whether they did a good job or not. And meanwhile, in those 3.5 years, they're responsible for their own practice of what that looks like, how responsive they are. There's, how much communication they have, how much work they did. And if we can have that accountability straight across the board, we're really going to see that representation come back to us. And I think that's why we don't have, I asked for a review as mayor, and it was, we don't do that. I'm like, you're telling me I don't get to know how well I'm doing until 3.5 years from now? Like, are you kidding me? Like, what if I could burn the town to the ground and no one, I just get a couple of angry emails, and whether I respond or not is completely up to me. And I think that that's really sad. I think we need to check in with our politician and check in often with them, because that is who our voice, that's who's voting for us. That's who's making decision for us. So let's check in with them more often than 3.5 years, every 3.5 years.
And so, okay, so there's a good question. We've been talking about accountability of the politicians, but what do you think the role of the citizen is? How can they participate in their democracy in such a way that they're actually checking in with their politician and that they're engaged in their own governance? So they're not just saying, okay, Chelsae, I'm hiring you to go be my MLA and represent me. But how can you represent them if you don't know what they want? How can they participate in this process?
Yeah, I think that's going to take some time. I think people haven't been heard from for so long that they're disengaged. And fair enough. I get why you're disengaged. Why would you be engaged when I know someone who called the MLA's office every single day for 3 months straight and never heard a phone call back. He's disengaged now. Why would he ever become engaged? Because look what happened to him. So this is where we need someone who's going to want a politician that's going to come in and is going to show up. And I think it's going to take a bit of work from that politician to go out and to reach out to individuals to be like, I'm actually here to listen to you. So I'm going to put on town halls and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do as much as I possibly can to start engaging back with the population. So I think first and foremost is let's have an engaged politician that's going to seek out people. And then once we have people understanding that, wow, this politician truly is here to be our voice, then the people are going to come. They're going to start showing up. They're going to start voicing their concerns. They're going to come to these town halls. And I think that's the biggest thing is we need people to show up. And we see it time and time again. When people show up, that's when stuff changes. The people have the most power. I think government's done it for a reason of silencing everyone. And so they just come complacent. I think that's been done on purpose. And let's go back to putting the power into the people, and they're going to show up. They're going to tell you their thoughts, their feelings, all of that. And I think that's it. But it's going to take some time because we've been, I think purposefully disengaged by people prior to us. And it's going to take a lot of work, but we have to get everyone to start showing up and realizes that their voices do matter.
Mm-hmm, I agree. And that puts which I love, it puts the responsibility to also back on the citizen. You have to show up. If you really want to affect what's going on in your community, you got to show up somewhere. I'm actually, for the first time in my entire life, going to a Woodstock budget meeting tomorrow night. I have no idea what I'm going to do there. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what it's going to be, but I figure I might as well find a way to begin plugging into whatever's going on around here. And I'm just going to go and learn, right? And I'm not trying to tote myself around as a beautiful example, but that is just, show up somewhere. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I might as well show up because I care about the place that I live in. And you should too.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I get so excited. And I know municipal politics is a little bit different, but I am so excited when people show up to council meetings. I love it. I love having people there because I'm like, you care. You're here, you're learning. During council that you don't get input from the public at that moment, right? It's council sitting around, but it's just that reminder that these are the people you represent. It's you better make decisions based on the people you represent. So as an elected official, thank you for going and showing up, because it's once again that constant reminder of who we are making these decisions for. So good on you. You should toot your own horn a little bit and pat yourself on the back, like, yay, I'm going and getting involved.
Well, thank you very much.
A big thing.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm looking forward to it.
That's literally what I encourage people to do at every Take Back Alberta meeting. Is I say, there's one thing you have to do. If you do nothing else, you got to get involved. You've got to participate in your democracy, because I think a lot of people think the system is broken. And I don't agree. I think we are broken, because the reason the system doesn't work if we're not engaged in it. The system doesn't work if democracy doesn't work if the people aren't telling their politicians what they want. We're not in a democracy if it's just the politicians telling the people what they should want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're closing in on the end of this. Are there any parting words that you would like to leave with our listeners or the people you represent?
So, actually, there is something. And someone said this to me, and it has stuck with me now for a little bit. And it said, if you don't choose your politician, someone is going to choose them for you. And that really hit home to me. And that's something I'd like everyone to consider, is that you get to pick, you get to go out and vote, and you get to call your friends and family and get them involved. And I think that's a pretty cool thing. But yeah, that was a hard pill to swallow. Of, if you don't choose your politician, someone will choose it for you. So those sort of my parting words with everyone is, get out, get involved. In this case, get your UCP membership. We have 2 days left to get I don't know when this will air, but at this moment in time, we have 2 days to get our UCP membership in order to be able to vote in this nomination race. And then from there, it's going to be getting involved and ensuring that we have representation that's truly going to represent us. So that's my parting words. Beautiful.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us and for spending some time on our show. I really appreciated this conversation, and I hope we get to do it again sometime soon.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I guess I love to hear myself talk, hence why I'm in politics. So,
I think you did a great job, and I just want to thank you. And I believe this is important to do, but thank you for putting your name on the ballot. Right? Thank you for stepping up and saying, actually, I will take on the burden of public office, which is a burden. Like you pointed out, there's a lot of easier ways to make that much money, especially for someone as talented as yourself. But that is what this is about. This is about representing the people. And I really appreciate your attitude on that. So thank you.
Well, thank you guys once again for having me. And so I hope we get to do this soon.
Thank you for listening to The Canadian Story. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at The CAD Story. That's the CAD Story. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Let's work together to remind Canadians how great their country is.